And welcome back to Block TV. It is, of course, time for Fireside Chat. And today, a treat for all of us here at Block TV with one of the people who will have a defining say when it comes to the future of cryptos and blockchain, namely CFTC Commissioner Dan Berkovitz. And not only will he have a bit, hello to you, very, very glad to have you with us. A bit about you and a bit of an introduction, as Mr. Berkovitz was appointed by the U.S. President as Commissioner late last year, but he's no stranger to the federal agency, having served as General Counsel of the CFTC during the Obama administration, and as well, among many other things, during that time, also, he was one of the key figures who wrote the rules and regulations implementing the Dodd-Frank Act. Of course, much difference there. But he's no stranger to the plight, if you may, of emerging markets, and has been quoted before as having guaranteed that the CFTC is pro-innovation, and I'm quoting you right now. We do not have an anti-crypto or an anti-blockchain attitude. We're not out to get new technology. We're out to get the bad guys. And I want to start, Mr. Berkovitz, with thanking you, as I said, for being here. Let's start with, have you gotten the bad guys?
Pardon?
Have you gotten the bad guys?
We're working on it. We have a very active enforcement division. We've got about 160, 170 people, and they're solely devoted to getting the bad guys. We've brought a number of cases. We've got cases pending, and we've been pretty successful so far in the courts in our cases. So we're working very hard at it.
Working very hard. The entire sphere, I think, is looking very much at the CFTC and, of course, the SEC and some of the, the establishment behind it. You're speaking just to DC, from the headquarters. I want to start with rules and regulations. What are the challenges that blockchain technology presents to the CFTC at this point in time?
Well, it's a very rapidly emerging and developing technology. There are many competing visions as to what its potential uses are, its applications, and the technology itself. Our regulations are quite flexible. We've adopted to lots of changes in the financial sector previously. Our regulations are not extremely prescriptive. They're based on general principles. So we can accommodate new technologies, but without knowing exactly what the technology is, exactly how the blockchain will be used and for what purposes, we don't have a definitive set of rules that we can say, well, here's how this is going to apply to this particular technology. So it's an interactive process that we're engaged in right now.
Interactive, though, if we're sitting right now at, the first quarter of 2019, how long do you see or you foresee the process of regulation when it comes, let's say, both blockchain technology and the crypto market?
Well, according to the best information that we have from our outreach and our following of this, it may take some time. We're not expecting necessarily instant results. We think that these technologies may take some time to develop in the short term. There may be uses for cryptocurrency in the longer term. Blockchain, I think we're looking at a process of several years. So we don't have a definitive time frame on it. We're patient. We've set up a program here called Lab CFTC, where we allow people who have new ideas and new technologies to come to us and ask us how the regulations might apply, inform us of what they're doing. And so we have established this new office and this new program. So we're here for the long term.
No, indeed, you've made it very clear, and I think that's one of the comforting things that the CFTC is behind blockchain. But I'm wondering with you, because you said the CFTC needs to see how it can be applied in places like, and I think you just gave a speech, or you're part of a panel at the Agriculture Conference of 2019, and in places like the food industry, supply chains. Can't one say that it can already be applied there?
Yes, well, food chain and supply chain is one area of potential application that we're very interested in. In our markets, we deal primarily in the derivative markets, not the actual physical supply market. But in the derivative markets, many of our regulations require that people keep records of what they're doing in the supply chain. Right now, the process is very expensive and it requires a lot of record keeping, and then we have to have access to the records. If for example, blockchain technology. We can be a node on the blockchain, for example, and we can have direct access to these records of the various participants rather than going out and asking them for data, send us your data, send us your records. If we have access to this on the blockchain and we know that record has integrity, that could save a lot of costs both for us and the people that are in the market that have to keep these records.
And that would be a move then towards actually solidifying the market, you're saying?
It would be a move that would very much facilitate our interaction with the market and facilitate some of our requirements for the record keeping and reporting requirements. Yes, it has that potential.
Now, are there unique challenges for this market, or are they similar to those posed by any new technology?
Well, as I mentioned before, our system is quite flexible. We have been able to accommodate new technologies and new products in the financial markets. There are some unique challenges with the blockchain, and it depends which direction it goes. If we're talking about permissionless systems where anybody can participate and there's no single authority that has control over the blockchain or over the network, that's a different situation than we're normally used to dealing with, and our regulations are very focused on specific entities, the intermediaries, and say, if you are in this market facilitating transactions, we regulate you. On a permissionless blockchain that's decentralized, it's harder to, it's more of a challenge to see how our regulatory structure would fit in there. If it's a permission blockchain that's within a company or something like that, that might be more readily adaptable to where we are. So there's some similarities in that we've been able to accommodate new technologies before. On the other hand, this technology has several unique characteristics that will require us to look carefully at to see how it would apply.
And when when this process is going on, it's not just you guys; it's also the SEC. How do the SEC and CFTC make sure they don't step on each other's toes when new technology arrives?
That's an excellent question. This is something that we've been working at with the SEC and trying to improve our processes this way for many years. This is an issue that we deal with them on a variety of fronts. So we have established working relationships. We have very good dialogue with the SEC and their staff. Our regulatory mandates, the laws are different. We focus on the commodity markets, and they're obviously in the security markets. So it requires close consultation and coordination, which we have well underway on a number of areas, including cryptocurrency and blockchain.
Well, there are inevitable clashes, I'm assuming. How do you resolve them, the two of you?
Well, it requires a lot of close work and cooperation, and I think in recent years we've made actually a lot of progress towards harmonizing the two regulatory schemes. They don't fit necessarily like a glove.
Right.
Market participants are continuously coming to the agencies to ask for clarification. Do they fall under this scheme or under that scheme? But we work closely with them and try to minimize those as much as we can. As
federal agencies should. Now, how do you find the right balance between protecting investors? Let me rephrase this. There are many critics who, and it's almost like a buzzword already, that have said that big federal agencies are stifling innovation, et cetera, et cetera. How do you find the right balance as you're looking at regulation, as you're looking at this emerging technology, between protecting investors but also promoting the innovation?
Right, they're not necessarily in conflict. We're finding recently that a lot of participants in these markets want to be regulated. They don't want to be unregulated, viewed as somehow rogue and outside the system. That our regulation and being under the umbrella of a regulatory system provides those same potential investors with confidence that if they trust their money to an unknown counterparty or put their money in a blockchain and there's no identifiable bank, for example, or entity, that their money is safe, that they can make that investment, that they can go on and buy Bitcoin, or they can have their the blockchain record of transactions is trustworthy. And if there's a regulatory system and somebody overlooking that who can say, yes, you worked, the system is within the regulatory framework and meeting all regulatory requirements, and it's a trusted system that provides people with confidence that indeed they can trust their money and their corporate records or whatever to the blockchain. So it's not; those two are not necessarily inconsistent. It's not a costless system to be regulated. You have to comply with regulations and structure your operations in conformance with the regulatory requirements. But we try, and that's what I mentioned earlier. We have the effort lab CFTC.
Right.
We try to have a principles-based system so that we can be flexible enough to accommodate different business models, while at the very core protecting market integrity and preventing against fraud and manipulation. That's an absolute minimum, but that's not not committing fraud or not manipulating the markets and protecting investors' money should not. That's not an excessive cost. That's just a cost of doing business, and we try to minimize the unnecessary costs. But there's a certain amount of regulation that is absolutely necessary to protect the public, and we're committed to that.
What's the number one item on your desk waiting for approval?
We have a number of applications for a number of exchanges in cryptocurrency that are and products to be traded on these exchanges that are in the review process before the agency right now.
And I mean, I think you know where I'm leading. You know, I'm trying to touch on Bakkt with you, because when you look at the crypto sphere, so to speak, news sphere, everybody's talking about the anticipated Bitcoin futures market. 6 months passing since ICE. There was a shutdown. Was that the thing that's holding it back?
I can't really get into the specifics of where any of these particular applications are, but we have a very interactive process with all the entities that come before us, and working diligently with all the applicants to process their applications to get their products on the market. But we need to ensure that if a crypto product, just like any other product that's traded on our markets, meets all the standards, and we're engaged very actively with the applicants in that process.
Has Bakkt at least made it to the top of the list, waiting for approval?
All of the applications before us, we're working very hard on with the applicants, including that one.
Now, late last year, the CFTC released a series of questions for the public focusing on the workings of Ethereum and the market for its tokens, pardon me. What was the purpose of those questions, and were you pleased, actually, with the response?
Well, we had a very good level of response, and we're going through those. I think we got over 30 responses, and some of these were actually very detailed. The period just closed on that within the last couple of weeks, and we were very pleased with the level of response and the level of detail on the responses. We asked those questions for the potential that, just like Bitcoin, that Ethereum, there may be futures contracts or derivatives on those. And so we wanted to learn more about the technology, and the other feature of Ethereum, which is very much interesting to the agency, and we want to learn about, was the smart contract feature. Exactly. That on the Ethereum network, you have these smart contracts, and so we want to learn about, well, how does that affect potentially a futures contract in Ether, and what's the interaction? And so this was a really educational exercise for us, and hopefully, we get this information, and if people come to us with wanting to develop this technology in a way that's in our regulatory sphere, that would give us additional understanding and ability to deal with the technology. To
deal with the technology, could you quantify for me what were the type of responses, what you gleaned from them?
We got about more than 30 responses. Our staff is reviewing them right now. They've not made it up. I haven't seen the summary of all the comments yet. I've looked at some of the letters. They're very detailed, and a lot of excellent information that, frankly, if one really wants to understand this technology, a lot better, one would really need to look at these letters in very detail. I was pretty much very impressed with the quality and quantity of the information that we got back.
Why?
Because this was something voluntary. This was not something that people had to do and spend their time writing multi-page letters explaining to somebody in Washington, D.C. How this technology works, or what the potential for it is, the pros and cons, and what we should be focused on. So typically, somebody will come to us with an application. We'll go and ask them a bunch of questions that they have to answer if they want to get their application approved. This was just a request for information that they could answer, they could respond or not. And we had a lot of people who spent a lot of pages writing back to us. So that's very encouraging that they wanted to.
No, entirely. And also, it's a sphere where people, are looking to progress. And, it clearly is, as you said, and you were quoted in the past saying, that the CFTC is behind. And it shows that the technology and also, the cryptos are in some way here to stay. But there is anticipation by the people, who are supporting this technology. And case in point, Bakkt, I know there's not much you can say, but if we're looking at this year specifically, can we say that there would be processing of that within the year within 2019?
I can't give a specific date on anything that we're processing, but I can say that we're working. We are working with ICE. We have been working with them closely, and all these are priorities with us. So we have our staff is very diligently working on that as well.
Then would you say that the people playing this sphere, like Bakkt, understand they need the CFTC, or that there is an understanding in this emerging market? There was actually an article that came out this week about the maturation of the blockchain technology as well as the cryptocurrency market, understanding that they need to comply, or that they need the CFTC, well, agencies like the CFTC behind them. Would you say that is something you're feeling also?
Yes, I think we have gotten that, and I think certainly from the institutional investor, if this technology is going to proceed into the mainstream, that cryptocurrency is going to be an asset class, like other asset classes, like equities, like commodity, something like that. Institutional investors absolutely would have to need something that's within the regulatory system rather than something without a regulatory system. So I think that there is a definite market need for to have a regulation of markets for these that institutional investors will invest in. So I view that I see that there's a significant interest in having a regulated cryptocurrency space versus an unregulated cryptocurrency space. Now, different types of investors, non-institutional investors, there may be a segment out there that doesn't want the regulation, that wants it totally independent of the current financial system for whatever reason, and they may choose to proceed in that direction. But there are other segments, if it's going to have widespread adoption in commerce, if it's going to be an asset class like other asset classes, parts of portfolios, et cetera, and mainstream commerce that major American companies or mainstream American companies or small businesses even are going to invest in, that they want to know that their money is safe and that it's protected against fraud and manipulation. And so they want that seal of approval, for lack of a better term, that government regulation can provide.
And you said something similar a few weeks ago. You want to see more corporations using it, I'm assuming.
And that would be one of the results of, I think, having potential results of certainly having a regulated marketplace for cryptocurrency. To
lead to more mass adoption in that respect.
Correct.
Okay. Now, when it comes to the market itself, this emerging market, had a very bad press, one can say. And again, I'm not asking to quantify time-wise, but and we're looking at it maturing in many, many ways, but did it, stop the CFTC or make it harder for regulation processes to move forward because of all the fraud and what we saw, in the past? One would say, I would say 2 years, where many things kind of fell apart.
Well, I think what we saw and what there is continuing out there, I don't think it has stopped, but that this technology, cryptocurrency, blockchain, whatever, just like any other asset class that come into being over, take a century and a half, or even beyond that, there's nothing particularly special about this that makes it immune from fraud and manipulation. And so we have to be as vigilant in this area, just like in any other areas, for that potential, and we are. And also with new technologies, frequently, and it's not limited to cryptocurrency or Bitcoin, there can be a certain enthusiasm, one might call it a hype, or over-optimism, that this will be the technology that will be free of the problems that have occurred in the past. And there's a certain enthusiasm, there's a certain optimism that this will grow very quickly, and people might view it as a way to make money quickly or something like that, which makes it a little, new technologies often are susceptible to fraud and manipulation because they're not regulated. Yeah, exactly. So we're very vigilant for that reason as well. And we've been moving aggressively, not only to regulate the derivatives markets, which is our primary objective, the futures market, for example, and the swaps market, but we do have our jurisdiction by law also extends to what we call the spot market, to day-to-day transactions. So we don't establish regulations for how things are traded, cryptocurrency or oil or gold or whatever, between two people. We regulate the futures markets in those commodities, but we do have jurisdiction over fraud and manipulation in these types of transactions. So if somebody defrauds somebody in a gold transaction or in a cryptocurrency transaction, that comes within our purview. And we moved very aggressively several years ago to bring cases and assert our jurisdiction in the crypto sphere where there was fraud in just a cryptocurrency transaction. Right. It wasn't even a futures contract. And we were upheld by the courts. We've had several court decisions that have upheld our prosecutions in that cases and said, yes, the CFTC has the fraud and manipulation jurisdiction. So very early on, as these cases arose and this potential for fraud and manipulation arose, we moved aggressively to assert our authority and to take action where
action was needed. Now, it's no secret that the crypto market is in a bear streak, one can say. To put it mildly, we had several interviewees on this week saying that spring is upon us. Do you see an end to this winter in the cryptocurrency sphere?
I try to stay out of the business of projecting when winter or spring is going to end. So yeah, I don't really have any views on the future of that. But we're ready. And working regardless. We don't really look at the market level or anything like that in terms of our regulatory program. As I mentioned before, we've put in Lab CFTC. That's a long-term program. Our enforcement division has people devoted to this for the long term. So we're in it for the long run, regardless of whatever the price fluctuations may or may not be in the shorter term.
I think all of us are looking for an optimistic line, and I'm just digging deep for it. But you handled it very, very well. And clearly not the markets. But again, you said that blockchain is here to stay. I would tend to agree with you, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting in the studio. But all that said, would you find it to be, because you've been with the CFTC for a long time, not before being commissioner, is this an exciting technology to you?
Well, absolutely. We've struggled for many, many years. And you mentioned I was here 7 years ago. Right. When we put in place, after the financial crisis, we decided we needed a better system for the financial market to keep records of all their transactions and for us to get access to those. Because prior in the crises, every time there was a crisis, we had to send teams of people out to send them up to tall skyscrapers in New York, and they'd be holed away all weekend eating nothing but pizza and trying to figure out, they give you these long printouts of transactions and try to figure out where people's positions were. So we put into place a system after the financial crisis where the entities, the financial markets had to keep records of what they were doing and report their transactions to a swap data repository. Well, frankly, that system is in place, and swap data repositories contain all these records of the transactions, but it's a very expensive system, and it's still not easy to access, and it's not easy to compile and analyze. We've made a lot of progress, but it's a rather expensive system. There's a lot of inefficiencies, and we're still working on eliminating those inefficiencies. Something like blockchain, if it realizes its potential, can save a lot of costs. That there's a really reliable, immutable record of these transactions that we could easily access. And so it's got the great potential to simplify a lot of this record keeping and reporting. It's just a massive amount of data. I view it as quite a long-term project that technology development that will start with individual entities and perhaps start with individual and then grow to make it interoperable or interactive between entities. So I'm hoping that this technology can really improve this something that has plagued this industry for a while in terms of the massive amount of information, the reliability of the information, the access of the regulators to the information.
No, exactly that. But at least, we do understand that you're in it for the long run. Commissioner Berkovitz, I want to thank you so much for joining us from DC today. This was incredibly informative.
Thank you very much.
And that was, of course, Fireside Chat for us. Do not forget to check us out, BLOCKTV, on every social network that you have, and we will be right back.